Hello there, and welcome back to BuildQueue. This is going to be part 9 in a multi-part series about building Unity projects with Jenkins. In this part, we're going to be getting set up on our iOS build pipeline. If you've been following along with this course and you've already built for other platforms, this platform is going to seem very similar to those. We will be making some slight deviations though. We're going to be changing up our deployment strategy just a little bit. We're still going to be deploying to Nexus like we have been in previous videos. However, we're also going to be deploying to our Mac device because we have another build pipeline that we're going to have to set up in part 10. We'll address part 10 whenever it comes up though. For now, let's go ahead and get started. So go ahead and open up your Unity side build script. If you've been following along so far, you know this next part, we're going to be using one of our previous platform functions here. I don't really want to use the build Android, that has a lot of bloat. We don't necessarily need all that. So I'm going to copy the WebGL once again, and then I'm going to paste it down below. And then I'm going to rename this to build iOS. The path will be updated to build/iOS. The more I look at this location path name, the more it seems a little obnoxious writing it this way. So I'm going to remove all this and just set it equal to path. That's good enough. And actually, I'm going to make that change up here too for build Android, removing all this. And then same for WebGL. I'm just going to set these equal to path. And then you're going to change the target to buildtarget.ios. And then we still want to be able to zip this up because we are still going to be storing some things on Nexus. And that's everything that we need over on this side. So let's go ahead and swap on over to our Jenkins file. All right, and now that I'm over on my Jenkins file, I'm going to go ahead and copy over one of my previous platforms that we've created. I'm going to come to the bottom here, make sure that I am pasting this in after stage for the deploy Android. I'm going to paste this in, reformat things just a tiny bit, and I renamed the stages to build iOS and then deploy iOS. Underneath the build iOS, we need to go ahead and set our parameters here. So build WebGL will instead be build iOS, all caps, and then in deploy iOS, it's going to be deploy iOS, all caps, like so. All right, let's take a look at build iOS again. So what we need to change here, we need to change the execute method. We are looking at, instead of WebGL, we are looking at build iOS, and make sure that this is spelled the same way that you spelled your function. If we come to the deploy iOS section, we are going to update the artifact name. Instead of WebGL build, it's going to be iOS build. And then if we come down to the bottom of deploy iOS, we are going to change the project path here for the upload file. Instead of webgl.zip, it's going to be ios.zip. After updating the upload file path location, we want to update the path that we deploy to on our Nexus artifact repository. So if we take a look all the way here to the right, it is being deployed inside of a WebGL builds folder. We want to change this. Instead of WebGL, we want iOS builds. So we basically fast-tracked iOS to go ahead and get in line with the other build platforms that we've already completed. But the next thing that we want to do is we want to be able to deploy this not just to our Nexus repository, but we want to deploy to our Mac device. So let's go ahead and do that. Before I start deploying to my Mac Mini though, what I want to do, just so I don't have to constantly come back in here and change some values, I want to set a static IP on that device too. So I'm going to go ahead and head over there and do that. Now I'm logged into my Mac Mini, so I'm going to come to upper left hand corner, select the Apple, select system settings, then you're going to select network next to Ethernet, or if you're connected via Wi-Fi, you can use Wi-Fi too, but for myself, I'm using Ethernet. So I'm going to click the arrow next to it. I'm going to select details, select TCP/IP, change configure IPv4 to manually, and I went ahead and filled in a lot of this information myself. So for the IP address, you just set it to whatever you want your static IP address to be. For myself, I just use 192.168.1.201. Subnet mask, you can go ahead and just copy this. And then for the router, you need to find your gateway information. If you already set this up on your Jenkins server, it will be the same information. After you're done, you select OK. Now, if I want to be able to migrate files from my Jenkins server to my Mac Mini, then there are 3 things that I need. One, we just set up, which is our static IP, and we've already set up the other 2. We need a username and a password. So I'm going to use my buildqueue username. If you set up a Jenkins username, you can use that. And then we're also going to need to supply a password. And the password, I don't want to just store in plain text on my build pipeline. So let's go ahead and navigate back over to Jenkins and let's go ahead and store that password there. From my workstation, I went ahead and logged in on Jenkins. I'm going to select Manage Jenkins. I'm going to select Credentials. I'm going to select Global. Going to select add credentials. For the kind, I want to use secret text. For secret, I'm going to put in my password. For my ID, I just said Mac password. And then for myself, for the description, I just put password to log into Mac Mini, and then I select create. Now those credentials have been added, so I'm going to navigate back over to my Jenkins file. I'm back over on my Jenkins file now, and I need to navigate to the environment variable section. So at the very top of the pipeline, I went ahead and put in Mac password, and it's linked to the credentials that I just put in, and they were called Mac password for the ID. So make sure that you have this in there. After you've added your credentials, the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to actually add a third stage here. I decided to separate things out because this one's going to be deploying to Nexus and the next one is going to be deploying to our Mac. So I'm going to go ahead and change the stage name here. Now it is deploy iOS Nexus, and then I'm going to change this parameter here to deploy iOS Nexus. So make sure that you change the parameter too. So I'm going to copy this stage here. I went ahead and pasted it down below, and the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to update the stage name. I changed it to deploy iOS Mac, and then if you go to the parameter name, I changed that to deploy iOS Mac instead of deploy iOS Nexus. So make sure that you change that parameter too. Now let's go ahead and modify this stage. We're not going to need the build date. I'm going to change artifact name to project name, and then I'm going to set this equal to project name. That is what we have defined up at the very top of this file. We just need it to be set as an environment variable to pass into the next part. We're going to change it from bat to PowerShell. The next thing that we need to do is we need to go ahead and clear out the PowerShell. So go ahead and clear out the contents here. And then the first thing we need to put inside the PowerShell is we need to go ahead and establish a connection directly with the Mac device. So how are we going to do this? Well, you're going to put this command in. This is what I had to use. I had to use netuse and then specify my IP address of my Mac device. This is the static IP that I added, and then /user, and the username is buildqueue, and then I'm pointing to the environment variable for my Mac password. This Mac password is the credentials that we added to Jenkins not too long ago, and it's linked to this buildqueue account. So this will establish a connection with the Mac Mini that I have set up. Now, I know this next part's going to be a little bit strange since it seems like we're looking into the future a little bit, but this is just some due diligence and good maintenance. So the next thing that we're going to be doing after we've established our connection, we're going to remove the contents from our deployment location on our Mac device before we try to copy anything new over. And the reason why is because whenever we try to copy over from our Jenkins server to our Mac Mini, well, I'm using a Mac Mini, it's going to just try to jump the contents into there indiscriminately. So it will replace and write over files that are currently there. But if there are any other new files, or if any files are different from what was deployed there previously, it's all just going to sort of merge together and it's not going to be pretty. So we're going to be removing everything in our deployment location on the Mac. So in order to do so, we remove item/path, then we specify our IP of our Mac device, specify our username on the Mac device, which is going to be buildqueue, and then the directory is going to be desktop Jenkins builds. Jenkins builds is the same shared folder that we updated the privileges to, and then the folder that everything's going to be dumped into is the same name as our project name. And our project name we specified here, and it's equal to what we have at the very top, and it is Jenkins Unity test. So all of our contents are going to be inside of a file called Jenkins Unity test. And then we're going to recursively delete everything. So files, folders, everything. We're going to forcefully do it. So if anything is running that has access to the contents of this folder, it's going to just delete it anyways. And then error action ignore. This is going to ignore things such as if this path doesn't exist. So if it's the first time we're running this, obviously it's not going to be able to remove a path. I don't want that to cause a failure with the build. So it's just going to ignore it and move on. The next line is rather straightforward. After we've removed the contents of that path, it's going to reinstantiate that path. So we're going to create a new directory, and it's going to be located at the same space that we just removed up above, and it's going to forcefully add this path. After we've removed the directory and then created the directory again, the next thing that we need to do is we need to copy the contents of our Jenkins build over to the Mac device. So how are we going to do that? We're going to use copy item here. Copy item at this path, and we are going to copy basically all the contents of our iOS build location on our Jenkins server, and the destination is going to be on our Mac at that address that we created up above. So it's going to be located inside of Jenkins builds on our desktop on the Mac device inside of our project name folder, which is Jenkins Unity test. And then we're going to recursively add all items. This will include the file structure, the folders, and all the files. And then we're going to forcefully do this. At the very end, since we're done copying all of our items over, we want to go ahead and end the connection. So in order to end the connection, you use net use and then your IP address of your Mac device and then /delete, and that will destroy the connection. Now, I believe that should be it for the changes that we have to make to our Jenkins file. So let's go ahead and test out our changes. So go ahead and push your changes up to your repository, and then I'll meet you over on Jenkins. I'm back over here on Jenkins, and before we create our new build pipeline for iOS, the first thing that I want to do is I want to go ahead and perform a little bit of maintenance here. Since we added some new parameters, we need to update our pre-existing build pipelines. If you don't have these other build pipelines, then you can just go ahead and skip this part. So I'm going to come over here to Android Unity project, select configure. Under parameters, I'm going to add parameter, hidden parameter. First one's going to be build iOS, and it's going to be false by default. I added another hidden parameter. It's going to be called deploy iOS Nexus. The value is going to be false. Then I'm going to add another hidden parameter. This one's going to be called deploy iOS Mac, and the default value is also going to be false. And then I'm going to select save. Once again, you're going to need to do that for every build pipeline that uses this Jenkins file. So I'm not going to waste time in this video going over all of those. Just repeat the same thing that we just did for that build pipeline, and then I'll see you whenever we are done. After you've made changes to the pre-existing build pipelines, you're going to select new item. Let's go ahead and create the Mac one. I'm going to copy from the Windows Unity project, and then for the name, I'm going to specify iOS Unity project. So name it that, and then copy from one of your pre-existing ones and select OK. At the very top, I'm going to change build Windows to build iOS. The next one down, I'm going to change it from deploy Windows to deploy iOS Nexus. And then I'm going to add another parameter. It's going to be a Boolean parameter. So not a hidden parameter, a Boolean. This one is going to be called deploy iOS Mac. And then I'm going to drag this one up to the other ones. You don't necessarily have to drag it up, but I like to keep these clumped together. Now let's add in our Windows ones that we just got rid of. So add in a hidden parameter. It's going to be called build Windows, and the default value is going to be false. Add another parameter. It's going to be another hidden parameter. This one's going to be called deploy Windows, and this one is going to be false. Everything else is fine, so go ahead and save. And the pipeline is set up, so let's go ahead and test things out. To test it, I'm going to select build with parameters. I'm going to build iOS, and then I'm going to deploy to Nexus and to Mac, and let's see if we have any issues. So select build, and this is going to take some time, so I'll see you when it's done. And it didn't fail, but it also didn't build. So I ran this 3 times because I didn't know exactly what was happening at first, but I know what it is now. We need to go back and we need to configure this job again. Some of you probably caught this too. We left our hidden parameters in from whenever we copied our Windows build pipeline. So you're going to scroll down to hidden parameter, not Boolean, hidden parameter, build iOS. You're going to select delete. You're going to select delete next to deploy iOS Nexus. You're going to select delete next to deploy iOS Mac. All these are hidden parameters, not our Boolean parameters at the top. And then you're going to select save, and then you're going to build again. So once again, I'm going to select these. I'm going to build and deploy to both areas. So select build, and now hopefully it'll start building. And it seems like everything finished. So the first thing I'm going to look at, I'm going to go ahead and look at the artifact repository. Okay, so I've signed into my artifact repository now. So I'm going to go to browse, Jenkins Unity test, and iOS builds is here, and it has our timestamp build. So nice. And we have quite a nice collection going here now. So great, that one worked. And then back over here on Jenkins, so it says that it was successful for deploying to the Mac. So I'm going to go ahead and log in, and let's see if I can find everything inside that shared folder. So here I am, I've logged into my Mac, and it seems like, yep, everything is here. It created this folder, and all of the contents are here. And here's our Xcode project. Nice. So everything is deploying nicely. If you have any issues, please let me know, because this could be very finicky, and I want to be able to address any issues that anyone runs into. And just real quick, since this folder was already open whenever I came over here to my Mac device, it was this here on desktop, Jenkins builds. Just double click that. And with all of that said, part 9 is done. Man, we're making it pretty far into this course. If you've stuck by this entire time, just good job, because I know it probably takes a lot of patience to be able to sit down and listen to all this. But okay, we've been able to build and deploy every single platform that we set out to do. So if this is where you're leaving the course, thank you for paying attention. The next thing that I'm going to do though is I'm going to actually deploy, but I want to be able to deploy it to internal testing on the App Store, which means I gotta fork over a little bit of money. I'm gonna have to go and bite the bullet and get an Apple developer account to continue with the last part of this iOS section. And then we still have one more Android section after this too, which will cost me $25. In the very least, Android is only $25 for the Google Play Store, but iOS is gonna be either $99 or $100. So, ouch. But being able to deploy to TestFlight is going to be a very valuable skill. So I will go ahead and get things prepared, and I will see you guys over in part 10 of our course. Thanks again for stopping by, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.